In the quiet town of Willow Creek, Tennessee, 8-year-old Sophie Bennett stepped into a courtroom with her loyal German shepherd, Max, by her side, a scarred hero who'd once saved her from darkness. What happened next, a secret signal and a dog's fierce reaction, stunned the judge and changed the course of justice forever. Join us for a heartwarming tale of courage, healing, and the unbreakable bond between a girl and her dog that'll leave you believing in the power of love. Don't miss out, subscribe now and hit the bell so you never miss a story like this on our channel. The courtroom in Willow Creek, Tennessee, held its breath as 8-year-old Sophie Bennett stepped through the polished wooden doors, her small hand gripping the leash of her German shepherd, Max. The dog's sharp eyes scanned the room with a soldier's focus, a jagged scar along his flank a testament to his past as a police K-9. Judge Henry Caldwell, a stern man in his late 60s with a face etched by years of hard decisions, leaned forward, his gaze softening as Sophie approached the witness stand. She wore a soft lavender dress, her hazel eyes wide with the weight of a case that could lock away a predator for life. Across the room, Edward Langston, a 47-year-old middle school principal with a polished smile, sat at the defense table, his calm demeanor masking the chilling charges against him. The jury, the gallery, and the entire town of Willow Creek waited, because Sophie's testimony could change everything. As Sophie settled into the witness chair, her fingers shook. But she glanced at Max, who sat alert beside her. Then, her gaze locked onto Langston, and her small hand made a subtle gesture, a signal so faint it might have gone unnoticed. But Max saw it. His body stiffened, ears pricking forward, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest as he fixed his amber eyes on Langston with a recognition that sent a shiver through the room. Judge Caldwell's gavel slammed down, the sound sharp as a gunshot. "This court will take a 15-minute recess," he ordered, his voice steady but his eyes never leaving Max. The German shepherd's reaction had just turned the trial on its head. Before the courtroom, before the silence that stole her voice, Sophie Bennett was a burst of sunshine in Willow Creek. At 8 years old, she was a chatterbox with golden curls and a laugh that could light up the gloomiest day. She loved fairy tales about dragons and knights, collected shiny pebbles from the creek behind her house, and begged for just one more story every night. Her parents, Clara and Nathan Bennett, had built a cozy life in their 2-story home on Maple Lane, where kids rode bikes until the fireflies came out. Clara, a kindergarten teacher at Willow Creek Elementary, nurtured Sophie's endless curiosity, while Nathan, a paramedic at St. Mary's Hospital, brought home a quiet strength that anchored their family. Their evenings were filled with board games, stargazing in the backyard, and movie nights with popcorn fights, moments that wrapped Sophie in the warmth of a safe, happy childhood. But on April 22, 2023, that safety shattered. It was a perfect spring day, the kind that whispered summer's promise. Clara stood at the kitchen sink, watching Sophie twirl in the backyard, her yellow dress spinning like a sunflower. Nathan was due home in 2 hours. And Clara was planning a surprise, maybe a picnic by the creek. At 3:38 p.m., her phone rang, her brother calling about their dad's retirement party. She stepped away for just 3 minutes. When she returned, the gate to their fenced yard was ajar. Her heart stopped as she saw Sophie, still there, but not alone. A man knelt beside her, a gray SUV idling at the curb. Its door cracked open. "I've got kittens in my car," the man said, his voice smooth as honey. "They need a little girl to love them. Want to see?" Clara's scream tore through the air as she ran outside. "Sophie!" The man's head snapped up, and in that moment, Clara recognized him, Edward Langston, the principal from Pinewood Middle School, a man she'd met at a school fundraiser. Across the street, 74-year-old Evelyn Harper, a retired librarian who'd lived on Maple Lane for decades, was watering her roses. She saw the scene unfold and shouted, "Leave that child alone." The distraction gave Sophie a split second to pull free, running to her mother as the SUV sped off, tires screeching. Evelyn caught part of the license plate, gray SUV, WKL, before it vanished. Police swarmed the neighborhood within minutes. But Sophie hadn't spoken since. She clung to Clara, her body trembling, her voice locked away by fear. Nathan rushed home, his face pale as he held his daughter, whispering, "You're safe now, baby." But Sophie's silence was a wall no one could break through. Detective Sam Carver, a 20-year veteran with the FBI's Child Protection Unit, arrived at 4:15 p.m., his gray eyes heavy with the weight of too many cases. "He fits the profile," Carver told Clara and Nathan, flipping through a notebook. "3 kids have gone missing in the last year within 80 miles, all lured with promises of pets." Clara's voice shook as she confirmed, "It was Langston. I've seen him at school events." Evelyn backed her up, her voice firm, "I saw him too. He judged the library's reading contest last summer." But as days turned to weeks, the investigation stalled. Langston's alibi, he'd been at a school board meeting, checked out, and his reputation as a beloved principal shielded him. Meanwhile, Sophie stopped playing, stopped laughing, her bright eyes now distant, haunted by nightmares she couldn't voice. Dr. Ellen Matthews, a child psychologist, diagnosed Sophie with selective mutism, a trauma response that silenced her. "She's physically capable of speaking," Dr. Matthews explained, "but the fear has locked her voice away. Recovery will take time." Clara took leave from teaching. Nathan adjusted his shifts, and they tried everything: Sophie's favorite books, her stuffed dragon, even ice cream sundaes. Nothing worked. Sophie's world had shrunk to a quiet, fearful shell, and her parents ached for the girl she'd been. The weeks following Sophie's attempted abduction were a blur of fear and frustration for the Bennett family. Sophie's silence deepened, her once vibrant spirit dimmed by trauma. She flinched at passing cars, refused to leave the house, and woke from silent nightmares, her small body trembling. Clara and Nathan watched helplessly as their daughter faded, her hazel eyes staring at shadows only she could see. Dr. Matthews, after 6 sessions with no progress, suggested an unconventional approach. "There's a program at Harper's Haven Animal Sanctuary," she said, handing Clara a brochure. "Dr. Susan Harper works with therapy animals, former service dogs who've helped kids like Sophie. It's worth a try." Clara and Nathan debated late into the night. "What if it's another dead end?" Clara whispered, her voice raw. Nathan squeezed her hand. "We've tried everything else. If there's a chance to bring her back, we have to take it." The next Tuesday, they arrived at Harper's Haven, a sprawling farm on the edge of Willow Creek. The waiting room smelled of hay and lavender, a comforting contrast to the sterile offices they'd grown used to. Sophie sat between her parents, her gaze fixed on the floor, her golden curls hiding her face. Dr. Susan Harper, a warm woman in her 50s with a braid streaked with gray, greeted them with a gentle smile. "You must be Sophie," she said, kneeling at a distance. "I work with special animals who help kids who've been through tough things. Would you like to meet one?" Sophie didn't respond, but her eyes flicked up, a tiny spark of curiosity. Dr. Harper led them to a sunlit room with windows overlooking a meadow. On a padded bed lay Max, a German shepherd with a glossy black and tan coat, his right flank marked by a scar from his days as a police K9. "This is Max," Dr. Harper said. "He used to help officers find people in trouble, but he got hurt saving a child. Now he needs a friend, someone who understands what it's like to be scared." Sophie stood frozen at the door, her body tense, but Max's calm gaze met hers, steady and patient. After a long moment, she took a small step forward, then another, until she was just a few feet away. Dr. Harper gave a subtle signal, and Max lowered his head to his paws, non-threatening. "If you're ready, you can hold out your hand," she said. Sophie hesitated, her breath quick, then extended her trembling fingers. Max rose slowly, his movements deliberate, and gently touched his muzzle to her palm. The tension in Sophie's shoulders melted, her fingers brushing Max's fur as if he were a lifeline. Clara stifled a sob, and Nathan's grip on her hand tightened. It was the first time Sophie had reached out since that awful day. Over the next few weeks, Sophie and Max became inseparable. Dr. Harper moved their sessions to different settings: the meadow, a small playground, even a quiet corner of the sanctuary's barn. Sophie would sit with Max for hours, her hand often resting on his scar, as if tracing a shared wound. Sometimes she'd bring her favorite book, The Dragon's Quest, and move her lips silently as if reading to him. Other times, they'd sit in what Dr. Harper called quiet companionship, Max's steady presence a balm to Sophie's fear. "She's connecting with him," Dr. Harper told Clara and Nathan in July. "Not with words yet, but through touch. Max carries scars she can see, which makes her invisible ones feel less lonely." The breakthrough came during their 10th session, in the meadow after a summer rain. Dr. Harper showed Sophie how Max responded to hand signals, simple gestures for sit, stay, and come. Sophie watched, her focus intense, then mimicked the come signal. Max trotted to her side, sitting attentively. "Good boy," Sophie whispered, so soft Clara thought she'd imagined it. The room froze. Max's ear twitched, but he stayed steady. "Good boy," Sophie said again. Louder, her fingers finding his favorite spot behind his ear. Clara's tears fell as Nathan squeezed her hand. It wasn't much, just 2 words, but it was a crack in the wall of silence. A glimmer of hope. That evening, as they drove home, Sophie slept in the back seat, her face peaceful for the first time in months. "It's a long road," Nathan said, his voice thick with emotion. "But we're finally moving forward." Clara nodded, her hand in his, daring to believe they might hear their daughter's laugh again. Meanwhile, Detective Carver's investigation into Edward Langston hit a wall. The partial license plate led nowhere. The SUV had been stolen the day before and was found abandoned 40 miles away, wiped clean. Langston's alibi held, and his standing in Willow Creek, where he'd raised funds for the local library and coached Little League, made many doubt the accusations. But Carver's gut told him Langston was guilty. "He'll strike again," he told his team, pinning Sophie's school photo to an evidence board alongside 3 other missing children. "We need to dig deeper." As Sophie's voice slowly returned, the investigation into Edward Langston gained new urgency. Detective Carver sat at his desk late one August night, sifting through traffic camera footage for the 100th time. The gray SUV's partial plate, WKL, had led nowhere, but a junior analyst, Mia Torres, burst in with a breakthrough. "We cross-referenced cameras within 15 miles of the Bennett house and the SUV's dump site," she said, pulling up a grainy image. "Here's the SUV on Oak Street at 3:45 p.m. on April 22nd. And 2 minutes later, this blue sedan follows the same route." She pointed to the screen. "It's registered to Edward Langston." Carver's eyes narrowed. He said he was at a school board meeting until 4:30. By week's end, they'd traced the sedan's path. It followed the SUV, then diverted to a storage unit before Langston appeared at the meeting, smiling for photos. Confronted with the footage, Langston claimed he'd been buying a gift for his sister at a nearby shop, a story the shop owner confirmed. "He's lying," Carver told District Attorney Laura Hayes. "The timing's too perfect." Hayes sighed. "It's not enough. We need more than a suspicious route." Willow Creek split into factions. Some believed the Bennetts, others rallied behind Langston, calling the accusations a vendetta over school budget cuts. News vans parked on Maple Lane, and anonymous calls flooded the Bennett's phone, some supportive, others cruel. Sophie's fragile progress faltered under the stress. "We're moving her sessions to the house," Nathan decided after a tough day. "She needs to feel safe." Dr. Harper agreed, bringing Max to the Bennett's home, where Sophie's whispered phrases to the dog grew into short sentences. She began drawing again, scenes of a girl and a dog, Max standing guard against a shadowy figure. Dr. Harper introduced hand signals for Sophie to use with Max, gestures for closer, lie down, and head in lap. What started as a way to manage anxiety became a private language between them. "It gives her control," Dr. Harper explained, watching Sophie guide Max through a backyard obstacle course. "She's reclaiming her voice through him." By October, Sophie spoke full sentences to her parents and Dr. Harper, her nightmares less frequent. She joined a homeschool co-op, Max at her side, his presence easing her into small social settings. Carver's investigation gained traction when Langston took a leave from Pinewood Middle School. A teacher, speaking anonymously, revealed he had favorites, always girls, 8 or 9, always bright. He'd call them to his office for mentoring. "I reported it once, but nothing happened." It wasn't enough for an arrest, but it fueled Carver's resolve. In November, Hayes greenlit questioning Langston. He arrived with his lawyer, Thomas Reed, his answers polished. Yes, he was on Oak Street. No, he wasn't involved in the abduction. Yes, he mentored students. No, it was never inappropriate. But when Carver showed Sophie's school photo, never released publicly, Langston's eyes flickered with recognition. "Interesting you know her," Carver said. "She doesn't go to your school." Reed interjected, "My client misspoke," but Carver had seen enough. As the trial loomed, the prosecution faced a challenge: Sophie's testimony. "She's speaking more," Clara told Hayes in December, "but talking about that day triggers panic attacks." Hayes suggested Max's presence in court, sparking a legal battle. Reed argued it would bias the jury. The prosecution cited precedents for support animals. Judge Caldwell ruled in Sophie's favor. Max could attend, wearing a plain therapy vest, positioned discreetly. Dr. Harper prepared Sophie, starting in their living room, then moving to the empty courthouse. By February, Sophie was ready, her bond with Max her anchor. March 20, 2024, dawned gray and heavy over Willow Creek, the air thick with the promise of rain. The Bennett household buzzed with nervous energy as Clara dressed Sophie in a navy dress with a white collar, her golden curls tied back with a ribbon. "Is Max ready?" Sophie asked, her voice small but steady. Nathan nodded, adjusting Max's blue therapy vest. "Dr. Harper will meet us there, sweetheart." Security at the Willow Creek courthouse was tight. A private entrance shielding the Bennetts from the crowd of reporters. Carver met them at the door, his gruff demeanor softening. "Just tell the truth, Sophie," he said, kneeling to her level. "That's all we need." The courtroom hushed as Sophie entered, Max at her side, his steps measured. Langston sat at the defense table, his gray suit impeccable, his gaze fixed ahead. Assistant DA Rachel Moore opened with a compelling case, detailing the abduction attempt, Sophie's identification, and Langston's suspicious behavior. Reed countered, calling the evidence circumstantial. Sophie's identification unreliable due to trauma. Sophie sat with her parents during the statements, Max at her feet, his ears twitching when Reed described Langston as a community pillar. When Sophie took the stand, the room stilled. Judge Caldwell's voice was gentle. "Do you know why you're here, Sophie?" She nodded. "To tell what happened." "And do you understand the difference between the truth and a lie?" Another nod. "The truth is real. A lie isn't. Will you tell the truth today?" "I promise." Max settled beside her, partially hidden from the jury. Moore approached carefully. Sophie, can you tell us what you were doing on April 22nd last year? Playing in my backyard. Sophie said softly. I was having a picnic with my toys. Moore guided her through the events, pausing when Sophie faltered, her hand signaling Max to press closer. Then came the pivotal question, do you see the person who approached you that day? Sophie's gaze swept the room, landing on Langston. Her body tensed, but Max leaned against her, steadying her. She pointed, her voice clear, him. The man who said he had kittens. Reed objected, the child was shown my client's photo repeatedly during the investigation. Caldwell overruled, the jury will decide credibility. Moore continued, Sophie confirming Langston grabbed her arm, that she'd been scared, that she'd seen him at a library event. Reed's cross-examination was calculated, his tone soft but probing. Was the sun in your eyes, Sophie? Sometimes, she admitted. Could you have mistaken my client for someone else? Sophie's fingers twitched, Max pressed closer. No. It was him. Reed shifted, the police showed you his picture, right? Could you recognize him from that, not the incident? Sophie frowned. I recognized him because he was in my yard. Reed pressed on. You didn't speak for months after, correct? How can you be sure of your memory? I couldn't talk, Sophie said, frustration in her voice. The words wouldn't come. But I remember his face. Moore's redirect was gentle. Did you ever doubt who it was, Sophie? No, she said firmly. I see him in my dreams. As Sophie stepped down, Max at her side, the courtroom buzzed. She'd held up well, but Reed had sown doubt. Clara and Evelyn testified next, their accounts aligning with Sophie's. During the lunch recess, a threat emerged, a note under the Bennett's windshield, drop the case. Or the dog won't make the next court date. Dr. Harper noticed Max's lethargy, a vet confirmed he'd been drugged with a sedative during a break. Moore informed Caldwell, who ordered heightened security. His voice stern, this court will not tolerate intimidation. The threats against Max escalated, shaking the Bennetts to their core. That evening, they found their front door ajar. Though nothing was stolen. Sophie refused to sleep alone, dragging her blanket to her parents' room, Max guarding the bed. The next morning, their car tires were slashed, a message scratched into the paint, liar. This is Langston's doing, Carver growled, photographing the damage. An unmarked police car took them to court, where Dr. Harper met them, her face grim. These threats are affecting Sophie, she said. She's regressing, less talking, more fear. Without Sophie's testimony, the case weakened, but she insisted on continuing, whispering, Max will protect me. Sophie returned to the stand. Max more alert, his gaze fixed on her. Reed's cross-examination intensified, but Sophie stood firm, Max's presence her anchor. Caldwell ordered further security, vowing to stop the intimidation. That evening, the vet called Dr. Harper with alarming news. Max's blood showed a rare toxin, potentially fatal with repeated exposure. Will he be okay? Sophie asked, clinging to Max. We're monitoring him, Dr. Harper said, but we need to keep him overnight. Sophie's reaction was fierce, no. They'll hurt him. After tense negotiations, a vet tech brought equipment to the house. Sophie refusing to leave Max's side. By morning, Max's condition worsened, his breathing labored. He needs the clinic, Nathan said, his voice breaking. Sophie nodded, tears falling. He'd help me if I was sick. I have to be brave. At the clinic, Dr. Lisa Monroe confirmed kidney failure from the toxin, starting dialysis. The next 24 hours are critical, she said. Sophie sat by Max, whispering, you saved me. Please don't go. Carver pulled Clara and Nathan aside, the toxins from a research lab. Langston's cousin is on the board. This wasn't random, it's professional. As Max fought for his life, Carver's team found a cabin linked to Langston through shell companies, its soil matching traces in his car. A search revealed a horrifying truth: a basement prison, where they found 9-year-old Lily Caldwell, Judge Caldwell's great-niece, missing for 7 months. Lily revealed Langston had shown her Sophie's photo, targeting her next. The cabin held evidence of other victims: clothing, journals, photos with red X's, including Sophie's. "He's a serial predator," Carver told Hayes. "This goes back years." Caldwell recused himself, Judge Anna Rivera taking over. The charges expanded to kidnapping, false imprisonment, and homicide. Remains found on the property. As Langston passed Sophie and Max in court, Max growled, his recognition sparking a memory in Sophie. "Max knows him from before," she whispered. Dr. Harper confirmed, Max had been injured saving another child 3 years ago, the suspect escaping. A DNA warrant matched Langston's blood to the scene, sealing his fate. He pleaded guilty to all charges, sentenced to life without parole. Max survived, his recovery a testament to his strength. A month later, Willow Creek welcomed him home with a parade. Sophie leading him down Main Street, her smile bright. Lily and Sophie bonded, their shared healing a light in the darkness. The town established the Bennett Caldwell Foundation, funding child safety and therapy programs. Sophie returned to school, joined a theater group, her voice growing stronger. On tough nights, Max sensed her distress, sleeping by her bed. His presence a reminder she wasn't alone. In May 2025, the Bennetts adopted Max at a ceremony at Harper's Haven, now a community celebration. "Max taught me to be brave," Sophie said, her voice clear. "He showed me I'm never alone." A year later, she spoke at schools, Max at her side, teaching kids about safety. "This is Max," she told a group of first graders. "He was a police dog who got hurt helping a kid. Now he helps me tell others how to stay safe." Clara watched, pride in her eyes, as Nathan whispered, "She's our hero too." Willow Creek transformed, new safety protocols. A community that listened to its children, and a German shepherd who'd become its heart. On quiet evenings, Sophie read to Max in the backyard, his graying muzzle resting on her lap. Their bond a testament to courage, love, and the power of a child's voice reclaimed. Lesson learned. Sophie and Max's journey in Willow Creek, Tennessee, teaches us that even in our darkest moments, courage and love can light the way. A little girl who lost her voice to trauma found it again through the unwavering loyalty of her German shepherd, Max, proving that healing comes from connection, whether with a furry friend or a community that listens. It's a reminder that bravery isn't the absence of fear, but the strength to keep going, and that sometimes, the smallest voices can spark the greatest change. What touched you most about Sophie and Max's story? Have you ever seen a pet or a child show incredible bravery in the face of fear? Drop your thoughts in the comments, we'd love to hear from you. If this story warmed your heart, give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who loves dogs, and tell us, who's the hero in your life that's helped you find your voice?